Welcome everyone to our 2026 Go-to-Market Predictions and Trends webinar. Super glad to have you today. I think we're going to have a lot of fun talking about what's going on in the world of RevOps and marketing ops and go-to-market strategy. And we've got a great group of folks to talk with you about that today. So welcome. Get myself oriented here. All right. We're going to go through introductions of our great speaker panel today. I'm going to just share some insights from, I've been to probably 20 or so conferences and different events with folks like yourselves out there who are in these roles trying to deal with what's going on in the industry. And so I'm going to share a little bit about what I've kind of run across and what I've heard from you all over the course of the year. And then we're going to jump into the panel Q&A. So this will be a very interactive session. They'll be able to talk about any of the things that I bring up or their own things. So super excited about that. And then we'll have some Q&A at the end. And then I'll try to kind of wrap up. We'll take a little under an hour here, and I think we'll have a lot of great stuff for you all. All right, so I'm going to start with our speakers for today. I'm Jim Bell. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at LeanData. I am just really enjoy working with folks like you all and living in the world of revenue operations, marketing operations, go-to-market strategy. My first speaker along with me today on the panel is Natalia Kochem. She serves as strategic partner to B2B revenue leaders and to PE firms as the VP of go-to-market strategy and operations consulting at OpFocus. OpFocus is a great partner of ours. We work with them. We know many great companies leverage them, and Natalia specializes in solving operational challenges involved with scaling, with specific focus on marketing and customer lifecycle. She works with leaders to align people and processes to their unique market position, designing operational roadmaps for go-to-market motions like ABX, buying groups, etc. So really working with customers that are leaning into the most kind of forward-leaning kinds of go-to-market strategies. Along with Natalia, we've got Matt Volm. Matt is the CEO and founder of Eventful, an events platform where you can run any type of event from webinars to in-person. He's also the founder and CEO of RevOps Co-op. So he represents I think it's 15,000 plus folks who are part of that community here. So excited to have Matt here to talk about what he's hearing from his community, 18 plus thousand. And Matt has a background spanning finance, operations, early stage tech, and really brings a very practical operator first kind of perspective to sort of more modern go-to-market and RevOps strategy. So super excited to have Matt here. And then Mike Madsen is also with us. So Mike is the global head of revenue operations at LeanData. So he is my colleague. Mike joined us more recently, but he's focused on driving the evolution of go-to-market strategy and building scalable revenue engine. He's kind of recognized as designing these best-in-class systems at a number of companies, including some great work that he did at Workday, and I got to see some of that as Workday is a client of ours. But he has over a decade of working in high-growth SaaS companies, including senior revenue operations leadership roles at Workday, and driving literally billions of dollars of pipeline impact within that role, and building new models and building really high-scale sort of programs to help companies improve their efficiency and to grow revenue. So super excited to have you here as well, Mike. All right, so to jump into it, I think I'm gonna start with the industry insights, and then as I ask each of you your first question, maybe you can just give us any more insight you want to give us about yourselves that I missed in your bios. Okay, so for industry insights, like I've been through, as I said, a number of conferences this year. I think I've been to London twice, Dallas, Toronto, Chicago, Boston, New York, Denver multiple times, Phoenix a couple times, etc. Just talking to folks like yourselves. And there are three big themes that kind of came out of those conversations. The first is sort of the buying complexity is just continuing to get more challenging, and we'll talk about buying groups later, but there's more people involved in the buying process. The introduction of AI has made it more difficult. And we're really living in a world where there's no longer this, to the extent it ever existed, this ideal of this nice linear buying journey that happens that we could then go and map our go-to-market strategy to, right? Which is where we had this lovely waterfall model that we've all been using for years and years. That whole process seems like is kind of broken up with all the complexity that's in the buying process and the daily use of signals we have, the number of technologies that we have in go-to-market, and the different teams that have specialized on the individual parts of that waterfall model. It all feels a little bit broken right now, and I think we have to move away from that sort of linear model. And what I heard was a lot of people sort of dropping the idea of focusing too much on attribution or focusing too much on this linear, progression of models that always sort of go in one direction. So that's one thing I'll throw out to our panelists as we move into the Q&A here. The second is really around AI. And so I think this has been a year of a lot of experimentation. There have been plenty of mandates from companies big and small to try out new things in AI. People do not want to miss out on all the value and leverage they can get from AI. But I do also hear that, sort of somewhere out of the 10, sort of trials or experiments that people are doing with AI, particularly in larger companies, somewhere between 0 and 1 of those actually get approved and move into production. And so I'm interested in hearing from this group, where do they think we are on AI and the balance between this experimentation movement to moving towards how do we get value out of AI and how do we leverage AI that we can trust? Because typically those 9 to 10 of those AI initiatives that get canceled have something to do with privacy, security, data, things like that. And finally, the third one I've heard a lot about is really the continued move towards buying groups implementations. The size of buying groups has increased. There's just a lot of companies and buyers are being asked to minimize risk, and that means bringing more people into the buying process. And that is creating strains on aligning your go-to-market teams because you have all these different folks involved in the buying process. But a buying group's motion is where people are beginning to do a better job of bringing together marketing and sales, oftentimes with sort of the sales development team as the linchpin or the central point to drive that alignment. And so that's another topic that I feel like I heard quite a bit of over the course of the year. Okay, let's jump into it and hear from the experts. My first question is, and this is kind of everybody is welcome to chime in on this one, but what's the biggest go-to-market leaders must prepare for in 2026? And maybe I'll start with you, Natalia.
The world that we live in is drastically changing for a lot of the go-to-market leaders because everything seems to be moving really, really fast. But I think the biggest shift is to focus on the things that are going to have the biggest impact. And that might make folks realize they need to move a little slower. And an example of that is focusing on really good data in your systems so that you can leverage that. So I think a theme that's going to come up for me is a lot of really great data and getting obsessed with that so that you can move really fast once you're there.
Terrific. Matt, let me ask you the same question.
Yeah, I guess on the whole data topic, that's really the area that I think is going to shift in 2026. So I think we're coming to a realization that a lot of these things like AI, for example, is only as effective as the data foundation that we ultimately have. And so investing in data-related projects, data hygiene is going to be at the forefront, I think, next year. And I think whether you're in RevOps, whether you're leading marketing, sales, customer success, you're a frontline manager, I think that's the biggest thing that folks have to prepare for.
All right.
Yeah,
thank you.
I'll just add on to that too, Jim. I think I agree with both of you guys that the data foundation is key to all this. I would go further though, as saying that the other kind of key thing that I'm seeing is building out the rest of the architecture and how this actually is going to work in practice, right? Today, we've been doing kind of piecemealing one-off agents that are kind of looking at, single data sets or very narrow focuses. And they haven't been as strong to, produce ROI as Jim alluded to. I think preparing for that influx of how are we going to architect data to context to intelligence all the way through to orchestration and agents is going to be the biggest shift that I'm seeing here coming into the next year and a couple of years after.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think the data kind of lives at the center of all this stuff. And we certainly heard a lot of that this year between CRM and CDP and all these other stores. And where do the key sort of metrics live that are going to help make better decisions, but also to drive action among teams. Fantastic. Okay, let's see. Number two, this one I think for Natalia. So as revenue and go-to-market strategy consultant, as you are and your team works on, so kind of what strategic errors do you see that companies make when they are planning for 2026? We've got a lot of folks, in that planning process right now. What should they watch out for?
So I said that data is going to be a theme. Just to elaborate a little bit further on that, and similar to what Mike, I think you were alluding to, is like getting the data model right. And from my perspective, that is not building systems to how sellers sell, but by how buyers want to buy. And so if you don't take a step back and look at how your buyers are actually finding you, uncovering information of why you are the tool or the software or the solution to consider, and not catering your messaging and everything along those lines, you're going to be adding new technology to, I would say, broken GTM assumptions, kind of just elaborating more on kind of false foundational layers. And so if you don't take a step back to really understand how your buyers buy and the messaging along those lines, and when I talk about data, I'm formerly a marketer. So from me, I'm more about like personalized content, the right messaging at the right time. And I'm not sure about you, Jim, but with AI, I have a much higher expectation of sellers nowadays, because I'm like, you have all this information available about me, so why aren't you using it? And I think the reason why is because the information at their disposal is not built on a solid foundation.
And the other thing is we have all this baggage of like how things used to be, right? That we're coming from, and we're like entering this new era where like the possibilities are truly endless, and we kind of need to, we need to like reconfigure our brains a little bit to actually understand and comprehend all the things you just said, Natalia, of like, oh yeah, this is what's possible. This is how we can do things now. I don't need to look at things from just the perspective of how we sell and what those linear stages might be. It's how do buyers buy and how can we best support that process. I still struggle with like trying to wrap my head around that as well.
It's a great mission statement. Operationalizing that is why I have a job. So I recognize that it can be hard.
Easier said than done. That is for sure. Yeah.
Natalia, I think that because we've always focused on like what's our internal marketing process, the handoffs to sales, all of our stages and all those things, that's like our own internal way of trying to measure the cycle versus like you said, how a buyer actually buys. We add in so much friction and so much complexity to the buying process that slows things down, makes it complex. And so, yeah, I agree. As a RevOps buyer and a buyer of go-to-market tech, I very much want more simplified kind of processes, ways that I can kind of interact with product or with, value props from the customers or prospects I'm trying to interact with or buy from. And it's way different than IMQL. I follow up with you and this linear flow. So I totally agree with your comment there.
I think you're hitting on another theme that I have for 2026, which is simplification. And I think we can all elaborate a bit more on that, but just with the craziness of the influx of information, I think how people are going to be making buying decisions is where things feel simple to make that choice. And so that's another kind of trend of how sellers and marketers can make the explanation of why their product is a great solution more simple for buyers.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me, so I think, data we've clearly established is a big challenge. I also know that, it can be a big and never ending problem. And I think there's some comments in here about, yes, it's sort of this stuff never kind of goes away. And as things evolved, so maybe Mike, I'll ask you, yes, as we try to get better about data, but in the meantime, we've got to deliver right against revenue goals. How do we sort of think about what signals or operational metrics matter most to be ready in 2026, and how does RevOps help, equip marketing and sales teams to pull that stuff out, even if our data isn't, cleaned and ready yet?
Yeah, no, I think there's a trend that I'm seeing in the industry and folks I chat with and other RevOps professionals of, historically when we talk about signals, we always thought about signals being a little bit of a, on trend here, a linear flow, that one signal hits, someone downloads a white paper, or there's an M&A acquisition that happens, or there's someone that leaves the company and goes to another one. And that's like a single point that we action on that. And we're essentially driving all of our demand gen or prospecting off of that single signal. I think what I'm seeing now, and there's an emerging kind of space here, is how do you capture multi-signals across the entire databases you have access to, whether that's marketing, sales, CX services, all of those kind of quote unquote signals, which, is this more or less data, and contextualize that, rationalize all that to then make kind of strategic bets on what the next best action should be. I know we've talked about next best action for a number of years. I think, though, that with the new models we have in place today, it's going to be significantly more effective at predicting what those next actions should be using kind of this multi-threaded, multi-signal kind of capture. I see that as like the future of where quote unquote signals is going. And then how to translate that into then the operational metrics. Where I'm seeing kind of two things to prepare for is, we kind of touched on this already, is the ROI of the AI use cases. I think there's going to be a big push going into next year and into the short term here of shifting from all the rapid prototyping that's been happening and really getting to like, what is the true architecture of how we build agentic workflows, starting at data, intelligence, orchestration, all the way to then where the agents sit. And so how we're going to be able to measure that is it incrementally making the sales process more simple, like we just talked about, more efficient? Are we converting higher? Are we making the actual sellers more effective? I think there's going to be a real measurement on each of those kind of use cases of what actual ROIs we're able to measure, whether that's fully agent owned and is that agent producing better than a human, or is it specifically a human in the loop, and how is that incrementally getting better? I think those are the core things that I'm seeing from an operational perspective is, how do we actually measure, is an agent and the AI workflows we're building better than current state of what humans are able to do today? And so I think how to RevOps prepare for that is really getting crystal clear on what your kind of AI architecture strategy is. What are the AI use cases you want to be focusing on, and having what I call like a walled garden approach, where you build the architecture, you have kind of this garden that people can play in, that we're really clear on governance, quality, QA, that we're able to objectively measure the outcomes of these workflows that we're building. So that's the big thing I've seen in the industry, and what we're trying to prepare for going into next year.
Yeah, thank you. Let me pick up on that idea of sort of, and many of us have probably seen this before. There's almost like a spreadsheet full of plays. This signal happens, we run this play, et cetera. But obviously, as signals start to pile on top of one another, that doesn't really work. Is that something that AI can help solve for? And maybe I'll throw it to you, Matt. Sort of how should people be thinking about AI initiatives for 2026? Is that a good place to put their efforts, or is there somewhere else where they can have more impact? And again, back to like, how do you be careful about where you apply AI based on data readiness as well?
Yeah, so when it comes to, I guess, planning for 2026, and you mentioned, and even going back to the last question, like there's so many signals that you can have access to now. There's so many different things that you can measure. Things can get noisy really, really fast. And so, the answer always depends on like what your company looks like, what's important to you. But if I was looking at 2026 and, the last thing we were talking about, like operational metrics, signals that matter, right? It's like, I'd start with my closed won customers. Like what was the buying process like for them? What sort of things did we do? What signals did they produce over that buying cycle to actually get to a sale? And then obviously look at, okay, if those are the things, then how do I do more of that for, like target accounts and customers that, are in my pipeline, right? So it's like, start with the universe that today, which is hopefully your customers. And on that note, if I think about planning for next year and where to focus your effort, my main thing here is just like, don't do things backwards. So don't say like, oh, well, we got to start using AI because like everyone's using AI and everyone's posting all these really great, like super complicated looking workflows and agents that do all these amazing things on LinkedIn. Is like, no, like, for me, it's always like, start with the problem, right? That you have, like, what's your order of priorities in terms of problems that you're looking to solve for? Do you have churn problems? Is it pipeline production problems? Is it conversion problems? Like, figure out like where you want to focus your energy, and then look at AI as one of the potential solutions to solve those problems, but it's not going to be the only way to solve your problems, and it shouldn't be the only thing you focus on either, because again, we've been talking about things like data, right? You need to have the right data foundation in place for AI to ultimately be effective. That example I just gave, you need to have an understanding of signals as it relates to how your customers bought and purchased from you, what that was like during the buying cycle, and able to look forward at what you want prospects and other things to do. So you got to have a solid data foundation in place. But the other thing is, like, if you have poor process, like, AI is only going to magnify these problems. So you also have to figure out, like, if you have your data in a good spot, is like, make sure you understand, for example, like how you would manually do things with a human or people before you say, oh, we're going to fully automate this with some sort of agent that's going to do this whole thing. And to go back to the like agent versus human in the loop thing that Mike was talking about, like, there's no shortcuts with any of this stuff. So don't try to take shortcuts, because you'll only end up getting to planning for 2027 and looking at how can I now fix all these things that I've basically broke or magnified, amplified these problems, for next year. And no one wants to be in that position.
Yeah, thank you. And we're going to go sort of deeper into AI in a little bit, but I wanted to sort of use that as kind of a jumping off point in terms of planning, et cetera. As the leaders on this call are thinking about their teams and sort of the skills that they need and what needs to change from that standpoint, I'm going to skip that one for now. And maybe I'll put this on Mike. Like, what skills will RevOps teams need in 2026 that might have been optional or maybe not as important in the last couple of years?
Yeah, no, and I wanted to maybe touch on what Matt just said. I fully agree. I think focusing all of the kind of AI use cases and what we're going to prioritize should be anchored 100% on what problems you're going to solve for, what your big bets are trying to make. So if you have a big cross-sell motion you're trying to run next year to drive revenue, how does AI going to help amplify that? I think that's spot on, Matt. So appreciate that call out. Yes, when I think about the skills that were happening in 24 and 25, there was we were still, I think, in a bit of a legacy of the era of high volume of automation through a lot of the kind of platforms out there that allowed us to kind of touch lots of leads and cover lots of accounts. And I think building kind of simple workflows to kind of broaden the aperture of how many people we were kind of interacting with was still a skill I was seeing a lot of people kind of anchoring on. Like I said, the signals that were kind of individual types, and we're building workflows off of those signals, and all of those types of workflows I think were still in prevalence a few years back. I think we were dabbling in kind of these AI use cases, and as we kind of all mentioned, it was very much starting with, let's go buy an agent, turn it on, and let it go do this use case without really having the data infrastructure in place or the strategy in place, or to an extent even what problem we're looking to solve for. And so I think as I see the future of where RevOps is going, it very much is going to be anchoring on this kind of agentic architecture of how to kind of build the entire buying journey, the buying kind of funnel, and having, like we said before, really strong data. I think that's going to be a huge need across all businesses, specifically in RevOps, to help kind of lead that charge. Is how do we kind of have a data ecosystem, a governance on that? How are we then going to be building on top of that, whether we're using MCP servers or kind of API types of workflows to kind of tie into all the other kind of layers of the stack? I think those are going to be unique skills that, in large enterprise businesses, they may exist in, the mega or major accounts of the world. In the medium SMB, it's definitely going to fit into the RevOps function. And so I think professionals in this RevOps category are going to have to up level around getting really tight on data governance, data strategy, MCP servers, AI workflows, how to build agents and prompt them, how to measure ROI off of those, and building this entire architecture. I think those are going to be no longer just nice to have. They're going to be required as kind of the quote unquote go to market engineering type of role becomes more and more prevalent across the RevOps team.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me kind of level that up now, and maybe for you, Natalia, sort of, we talked about kind of the skills on the RevOps team, et cetera. What about more at the organizational level, sort of, and go-to-market, structure overall? What do you see in terms of models that'll win in 2026?
I think that the go-to-market team structure is going to be changing in 2026. I think for RevOps, one thing I was going to say as far as the skill sets, there's kind of two sides that I want to make sure people really hone in on when they're hiring RevOps resources. A certain level of business acumen is needed for RevOps leaders. I think at this point in time, what we're going to be seeing as a trend is companies really realizing how critical a GTM ops or a RevOps role is in the business, that they're not just tech savvy and can get into the data, but they understand how that data serves up the business and serves up the direction of the business. I think GTM leaders need to start with having a very clear vision of where they're going to, and the RevOps leaders need to align to that vision. There can be a lot of spinning of the wheels. I look at AI as it's another tech tool, but if you have this mandate from your board to incorporate AI, it's not about, well, let's find a place that we can use this tech tool. It's going back to the foundation of like, where are the problems that we can focus on that are going to have the most impact to the team, and that what tools and resources are at our disposal that can actually solve that. So I think it is focusing on really setting that vision and then being resourceful with the people and the technology and understanding your marketplace as much as possible. I would say if there's a core element to guide teams, maybe from a GTM's ops perspective, when I think of organizational model, I am going back to kind of my Salesforce architecture mindset, which is understanding and getting very obsessed of what's happening at the account level is a very good way to kind of set the stage for a go-to-market architecture shift. Accounts buy, right? Leads don't necessarily buy. Leads don't necessarily sign deals. Deals are happening at the account level with all these people involved. And so it's getting very obsessed with that information. And if you can get all your GTM leaders aligned to what are the key metrics, what's happening at the account level, looking at that on a weekly basis, you're going to see a lot more wins across the board as a GTM team, because it's not just about new business, upselling, expansion. That's very critical to nowadays for companies.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Maybe I'll just throw it out to the rest of the group. Do you think people are still too focused on sort of the allure of the hot lead over, really sort of focusing on the world that's more focused on ICP based accounts and really sort of swimming in those waters per se?
I still see it on my end. I still see folks very focused on those volume metrics. But then you've got kind of two sides of the coin, where you have folks that are wanting to get to that account level and understand the importance of it. But there's still quite a few that are lead focused.
I would agree. I think the idea of, one lead comes in that converts and that person buys your product is highly unlikely. It's like you said, there's a committee of people, there's buying groups, these buying decisions. And so how to kind of build different types of workflows to measure the effectiveness of that. I think Matt kind of alluded to it, looking at your previous customers. What were the buyers that were interacting on your deal that you were able to close one? How do you then replicate that type of model further upstream for your demand gen or your prospecting. I think those are pieces that fundamentally, I agree, we're going to have to figure out how to do that more effectively. And I think having, data being an important part, but having then all of the AI capabilities to be able to match those scenarios to your buyers is going to become more and more accessible, given that the tools now are even more powerful than they were before.
Yeah, and it's like
stuff on that, and then also just hear what you're hearing for the community as well. Thanks.
Yeah, it's like stuff. So like things are so complicated today, right? Like it's never one marketing touch point that like drives a sale. It's never one person that drives an entire deal forward and like that decides to buy from you as well. And so, like, yeah, it's never like, I wish it was that simple. Like, man, could you imagine what life would be like if it was that easy, or it was like, oh yeah, like that one thing drove all this revenue. And so like, let's do like just more of that one thing. Right. But like, that's not the way it works. And same thing with like, you were talking about ICPs. And I think Jim, you mentioned some of the stuff up front about like, like kind of attribution and these linear things like, are kind of, I don't know, going out the window or, a lot less focused on today. I think the people that are doing it right and kind of entering this new era are the people that aren't taking for granted the way that things always have been. And they are looking at their ICP, for example, of, not just like, what data points have I always been limited to, but like, what else is available out there to help me define my ICP? And you just have a lot more information at your fingertips, and AI can, certainly help with that. And then, as it relates to things I'm hearing in the community, we've got 18,000 plus people, like you mentioned, Jim. I wasn't going to correct you up front, but you did it yourself. One of the biggest things I've actually, I guess I've heard two main things. One kind of hits on some of the stuff we talked about already. A lot of operators are being told by their executive teams, hey, like, you got to start using AI for stuff, right? And they're like, okay, well, what? Like, what stuff? Like, I don't know, like, just use it for some stuff, right? And again, like, start with the problems, work backwards. I hope next year is going to be the year we finally invest in some of those data hygiene, data quality sorts of things. And then the other thing, as it relates to AI more broadly, a lot of people in the RevOps community are like, they're kind of looking for like what's next when it comes to like those use cases. So like people really want to hear about like how are the best operators out there like leveraging and applying AI. And we've kind of gotten past these examples now of like, okay, I know I should be recording all of our calls and leveraging the context that exists within the call recordings, and we can kind of connect that to my CRM, and I can automate some and automatically update some some properties, stuff like that. But they're like, they want to go for like what's next. And so that's really what people are looking for, is like, how can I take that next step with AI? So those are two of the biggest things that I'm kind of hearing from folks right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to just take a moment to thank you and just remind people, I mean, for me, most of the best thinking and ideas that I've come up with have come from community and talking to peers. The best ideas that I steal always have some, basis in something I learned from somebody else. And, revenue operations, marketing operations, all these roles, it's not like there's a huge community within your company that's going to give you a diverse set of ideas where you're going to see who's doing new and interesting, and think like, what did they learn? What did they fail at? How do they get more efficient? Or how do you get more efficient in picking out the good ideas and the best places to try things, to pilot things? I just think if you don't have for you and for your team some OKR or something that says get out and talk to people in the community and talk to your peers, I think you're really missing out, because a lot is evolving and you just cannot expect to figure it out yourselves or with your own company. So between the communities like RevOps Co-op, certainly our OpStars and the events that we run, I see so much value being created by people and light bulbs going off and just deep questions being asked, because that's where you get like specific advice, right? We're doing this webinar, we're talking about more generalities and strategy, but living and operating in those communities, I think is incredibly valuable. All right. I'm going to keep moving. We can come back to any of the bonus questions if we have time. But so next question, I think, is just so Forrester, as an example, kind of predicts that ungoverned Gen AI will cost B2B companies over $10 billion due to risk, legal exposure, misinformation. Like, how should RevOps leaders sort of govern AI usage? And I'll just kind of throw this one out and see what thoughts people have. This kind of struck me as like a, kind of a bold statement, but not totally surprising, I guess.
I worked with a client that their legal team had an AI policy, and in choosing a vendor, they basically said, hey, these core like Gen AIs are what are acceptable. And I just think that, one, having an AI policy is a really good start, recognizing that there is an exposure and having your team kick that off and say, hey, individual users, how can you use AI? What kind of information will you be putting out there? And then there's the purchasing of AI tools for the business and kind of giving those guardrails for what can the tool do. So I kind of look at it as like, you need to have a policy for your individual, business users, and then also for the tech tools that you have, and getting started there.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I always look at I look at the misinformation part of like this comment. You got hallucinations, things like that. I was talking to someone a couple weeks ago who said they, didn't check the citations and sources for some things they got from AI. I wound up getting in a board deck. The board asked where that report was and wanted it sent to them afterwards. Then they went to the internet and they were like, oh yeah, that doesn't exist. So I see that as being an area where, it's like it can't replace thinking, right? Critical thinking, the stuff that you do with it. Same thing, like I used the CRM example before, like great. So you can have AI automate, property updates in Salesforce so that it updates, whether you're on like Spiced or Medpick or whatever, but like, it's like the inputting of those fields is not like the value. It's that you have someone selling according to a certain process that will drive outcomes, right? So like the point is like that information helps the human produce better outcomes, right? So like just because it automates getting in there doesn't mean it's going to automate all the other stuff that's supposed to be done with it. Same thing with, again, like misinformation, hallucination. Like I heard the great example of someone who's like, these AI models are, they're like MBA interns, right? They're going to sound super confident. They're always going to give you an answer that sounds smart, but it's up to you to like still use what you're given. So I see that as like a big area where, you can waste a lot of money, a lot of time.
I love how they'll politely apologize when you call them out. They're like, you're absolutely right. I was incorrect. But you know whose job is on the line? Your job, not their job. So it's like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. It's like, oh, yes, thank you for pointing that out. It's sort of like, okay, well, if I'm doing that, after it's already gone up to the board and then I've been called out, like that is not going to be helpful. And so, yeah, the undue confidence.
Yeah, and like, I guess I didn't give an answer on like how to govern that. So it's like, I don't know, I guess it comes down to, again, like training, enablement around the technology, the tooling, where you're deploying it. Like you can't just, like as a RevOps leader, you can't just take for granted that stuff's going to magically happen. People are going to leverage it, use it in the correct way, or that hallucinations just aren't going to happen, right? Like those are all things you need to consider as you're rolling these things out.
When it comes to tools that pitch themselves as AI related tools, I do look at ones that obviously, have the least amount of hallucinations and allow escalations to a human. Basically having those guardrails. And that's kind of, as much as companies can recognize like AI is powerful, but you need that governance instilled in your product. That's huge at this point for how companies are selecting various tools. They need those guardrails in place.
Yeah, and Mike, I'm curious, you talked about architecture, you talked about sort of data.
Yeah.
Is that a good framework to start with your criteria for governance on this stuff? Like how do people sort of figure out what's my list of criteria to look for?
Yeah, how I think about it and how I've chatted with other people is one, there needs to be like a foundational strategy that's tied back to whatever your business outcomes are, or whatever problems you're trying to solve for, right? There needs to be a strategy and an architecture that's, this is what we believe AI is and how it's going to be used across this business. And then there needs to be some type of governance, council, committee, whatever you want to call it, that oversees the entire strategy itself. And so it's going to be a bit of a balance between how much do you allow innovation and creativity and allowing folks to just try tools and play around with AI and come up with their own use cases versus what's going to be a top down where your kind of quote unquote committee of folks who own kind of the strategy are going to push down, here's exactly how we're going to use AI across the business. So that's where I see this idea I kind of alluded to earlier is like having this walled garden where there should be a group of folks that kind of own the strategy that really are getting into the weeds on how effective are these models at producing outcomes that don't misrepresent information or hallucinate. What's the right architecture that we need to kind of structure to be able to kind of facilitate all the use cases that sales cares about or marketing and so on and so forth. And then having that ability to kind of have like this, a walled garden where the end users can play within that space. They can be creative. They can potentially create their own agents if we want them to do a certain use case, but it's all predicated on the data that we've already kind of locked down, that they're not kind of referencing ad hoc spreadsheets with kind of ad hoc kind of information on it as an example. So that's where I kind of see this kind of blend between allowing creativity versus having like a strong policy where we're just trying to manage it all ourselves. And that's something that I think is going to be a balance that we continue to kind of, pendulum swings one way or another as we step into this stage.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. All right, let's keep moving forward. Maybe Natalia, for you, how does AI change planning and forecasting in 2026?
I'm curious how many folks are thinking about having half year instead of annual planning, changing it to semi-annual planning. I think it kind of goes back to things are moving really quickly, and there's an element where AI, if it's done right, it's capturing certain insights so you can have a better understanding of predictable revenue. So that can help you. You're gathering more insights of like, are you going to hit your targets? But I also do think that companies are kind of changing their strategy of their targets and annual targets versus quarter pivoting, seeing a bit more of an adjustment based off of what's really happening and incorporating those insights. The other thing is just recognizing the unknowns and kind of budgeting for that plan, trying their best to plan around that, right? So I think that there's some more conservative approaches that people are taking in 2026.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do that here. Yes, we have an annual plan, an annual budget, but in terms of objectives, and certainly in terms of the focus, it's 6 month, time frame is definitely just more, gives you enough time to operate, but just things are going to change within that time frame. That totally makes sense to me. So I would do one more kind of wrap up question on AI, and then kind of move over into sort of buyer journey stuff. And I'll open this one up. Maybe for each of you, what's sort of one place where people should look at AI, either a cautionary tale or hey, try this out. I think there's real value here. Again, going back to what you talked about in terms of how to apply it in a focused way, around a true business problem and based on, sort of success in the past. Matt, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I guess I'll go to the overhyped versus high impact. I think, and actually even going back to the last question of where to apply AI in planning and forecasting, the answer is not it will do it all and it will do everything for you. And again, like, we all see the stuff either on, LinkedIn or elsewhere where, it's like someone has like, right, is like, hey, I built this agent to do this really complex thing for me. And, it's incredible. And I've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, I built it in a day, sort of stuff. Like, that's not real. Like that stuff doesn't happen. So don't feel like, you see that stuff and you're somehow behind the 8 ball or you're missing out. I think the high impact stuff is going to be, again, going back to the high priority problems that you have, but then the more focused that you can be in terms of where and how you apply AI is really where you'll have the highest impact. So just use like an example of like if you're using it to help you draft like cold emails like for outbound, right? Like you could have like AI do like the whole thing for you, right? Or you could say like, oh no, okay, like I'm gonna have one particular like agent focused on the subject line. I'll have another particular agent focused on like the intro or the hook, and then another one focused on like I don't know, value prop, CTA, whatever it might be. Like that's just one example of how you can kind of take something, split it apart into relevant sections. The just again like the more tailored that you can, where like places where you can apply AI, like the higher impact you'll have. And with that, don't try to do a bunch of things at once, right? Like take a slice. The more narrow you get, the higher impact results you'll have. It's going to be very tempting to try to boil the ocean, apply it to everything because the universe is truly endless, but avoid that because you'll only run into problems and challenges.
Makes sense, Natalia.
We're in the middle of a project where there is a mandate to incorporate AI as well as really change how their GTM teams are using technology. And it's fascinating because there's this element of like, okay, well, where are we going to put AI? We are so focused on how the GTM team needs to be structured and fixing those foundational elements that at the very tail end, we're going to say, where are the biggest problems? And if we can use AI to not add headcount, maybe save some time, make the folks that have the biggest problems amongst the go-to-market teams lives easier because now they're removing a bunch of manual efforts. That's a really great win for them, right? So part of it is really, I go back to like the foundational layer, understanding what you can control and where your problems really lie. And then saying, okay, I have this tool that is supposedly going to help us out with everything. How can I apply a portion of that here? One takeaway, though, it's like action on is pilots are great, right? Pilots are great for teams that have no experience with a particular tool. And so just getting small to understand the capacity, the capability of a tool that you have at your disposal is really helpful. And then figuring out how to extrapolate from there. So I would say you think about AI as, I forget who said this, but like it can magnify problems. So keeping the problem focused, it is a real problem, but it is something you can pilot and action on without a lot of risk. I think that's the way you should think about applying it.
Mike?
Yeah, I think in the high impact space, one that I think there's a pretty strong application is on the CX side. So how do we get better at predicting churn? How do we understand what types of actions or workflows we should kick off to minimize churn? I think that's in my point of view, a high impact. Also just on the customer support kind of, interface side, there's lots of value there for sure, whether it's efficiency or just getting to answers relatively quickly. I agree with Matt on the overhyped side. I think just turning on some agents that can just do kind of the AI SDR and we're going to replace all salespeople with AI, I think is a little overhyped still. I don't see that happening anytime immediately. So I think those ones are definitely still in the overhyped category. And I think the last thing I would touch on is that we've talked a lot about AI, or at least I have a lot about how it can be applied to the architecture, the go-to-market kind of technology stack. But Natalia mentioned that apply, there's more to RevOps than just go-to-market systems. There is pricing, there is planning for fiscal, there is enablement, there's all these other functions, the traditional sales ops people that kind of help, AEs manage deals and run forecasting and deal review calls. All of those things are super important. And I think those things are also high impact, like being able to anchor your value prop and where your spend is and how you're kind of structuring your RevOps team. We shouldn't just over index on just tools and technology because that's where quote unquote AI lives. You got to figure out how to kind of up level and get strong value on all those other areas. Because if you have a bad plan at the beginning of the year, it doesn't matter how much AI you use throughout the year, you're not going to really be successful. So I'll kind of leave it with that too, Jim.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to add on to this. I saw like a really what I thought was incredible and like very practical presentation and application of AI at our OpStars conference in October. So it was by the team at Samsara, and they were like just picking off these specific areas like one by one, and just have been on this journey that sort of led them to building sort of like their own internal, sort of customer and GTM LLM, right? And that they then would continue to improve, continue to bring in new data and just solve specific problems. Like how do we get rid of bad data coming in through leads in the system, right? How do we get to like literally tackling, if you think about the process and the complexities of literally like getting a lead in the system, getting it to the right person, making sure it's clean, enriched, trying to set a meeting to move your go-to-market process and your selling process forward faster. There are a lot of little steps along the way. So you can bite off one of those pieces and just think about what are the capabilities you need to do that. So I'll point you guys to that presentation or shoot me a note, on LinkedIn or whatever, and I'll send you the deck. But that was one I thought it was really impressive and just, again, one of those examples of I think there's some great ideas out there you can steal for people who've been sort of tackling things, kind of one piece at a time. Okay, so I know we're sort of getting down to the final strokes here. On sort of want to talk about the buying journey. So increasingly buyers are sort of navigating this process independently. AI search is now kind of the number one, sort of process and source that people use. They use others, of course, but 30+% of them are definitely using sort of AI search. How should companies sort of redesign or think about their funnel or their content strategy to kind of serve this, kind of self-guided buyer as we move forward? Maybe start with you, Matt.
Yeah. So I guess I'll give a few examples. This also, I guess, maybe sound a little self-serving given that I have, RevOps Co-op, a community, but I think companies should look at kind of third-party media as a place to invest in. So obviously, like we have partners, sponsors, whether it's like in-person events, digital events, things like that. But I've heard from so many people, even like community members recently, where I've had some like onboarding calls and people are like, oh yeah, I found you because I was asking about RevOps resources on ChatGPT and you guys kept popping up. And the first time I heard that, I was like, oh, like that's cute. But then I heard it several times and I was like, oh, wow. And I wish I could tell everybody here like, oh yeah, the way you do that is XYZ. But like, I have no fucking idea what we've done to get us to that point. Like we just have tons of content out there on the internet. I think we're like this third party, kind of like trusted resource, if you will. And so when it comes to like content strategy, right? Like if you can invest, partner, coexist with places, I think that's a great thing to do, or start your own is like another. But I think like now there's enough communities, there's enough of these like, kind of third party like outlets, things like that, where you can invest in to help you see great outcomes in, the current day and age.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'll pass it to you, Natalia, and I'll add another option here, which is kind of talk about operational changes around this sort of buyer paced, buying cycle.
Yeah, I think, well, one, just to go back to you, Matt, like I'm a part of several RevOps communities. That is how I learn and grow. And that's how I challenge myself, and just, get exposure to what other companies are doing there. So they're very critical, and I highly recommend. The other quick thing is when it comes to AI, it's like, what is best practice? And sometimes it's really hard to know what best practice is when you're asking an AI. And so the other communities, like going to Forrester, having key frameworks as kind of like your North Star and figuring out how to apply on that. I think that, like, looking at operational changes, I'm in this mode of control what you can control and really figure out the problem. And if like, forget AI aside, like, where are your real problems? If your problem is that your buyers don't really understand how your product will solve their needs, right? It's really breaking down your buyer's journey and the information that you need to share with them around where they're at in the journey. But also recognize it's not just one person. Buyers are buying as a committee, right? So you have to get a lot more targeted. And there's a very valid reason to get a lot more targeted nowadays. And so if you're just recognizing that, and then you need to figure out how to operationalize that, that starts at the account. I will just tell you, everybody, it starts at the account level. It is a really good single source of truth if you can get obsessed at the account level, get into things like who owns the account, who owns it at this stage, you got it both sides, operational, buyer side, like, what have my customers actually bought? There's so many different elements and attributes that are critical to how you can target an account even more.
Got it. Mike, how about you? And I'll also kind of add another option for you to to sort of play out here. Actually, I'll leave it where it is. So, yeah, what do you think in terms of this sort of buyer-paced buying cycle?
Yeah, no, I agree with Natalia and Matt here, and I think Matt was maybe touching on this new area of AEO, shifting from SEO or not shifting, we're adding on to SEO with answer engine optimization, right? I think that's going to be a place that people will continue to go. I know I go a lot when I'm trying to do research on different tech that's out there from a RevOps, go-to-market perspective. So optimizing that, I think, is going to be a big area that both marketing plus RevOps or go-to-market ops, you need to anchor on. And then I'll maybe do a little bit more a thought-provoking comment here is going back to the simplification, how to allow buyers to get access to all the relevant information on your product, on your value prop. Historically, we've kind of tied those behind forms, or you have to give us your information to be able to get access to this stuff. Like, you can't see a demo unless you talk to a person. So I think some of that, going back to simplification, and we've created friction. Like, as a buyer, I just want information. I want to know if you can solve my problem. And at some point, yeah, if your price is competitive, great. But really, the first part is most important. And we've kind of always locked those things behind these sales cycles or marketing cycles. And so I think going to the future, my expectation as a buyer is that that's going to be so easy. I can talk to a bot on your website and it can pretty much tell me everything I want to know. And I can have a conversation with that chat bot as long as I want to qualify myself and see if this is a fit or not. I think those are things that I'm seeing and what I personally want, and where I think kind of the community is going to continue to shift is unlocking information, allowing buyers to kind of get this stuff. And we're going to have to figure out how much data retrieval we give up, where I'm not going to capture your email potentially, and I'm just going to go through a process of figuring out how to measure that effectiveness. I think that's going to be a problem, but that's where I see this kind of buyer pace changing towards is allowing buyers to kind of go through their own cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always sort of, not to diss like salespeople in general, but there's always sort of that, I've always had that feeling of like, if you can really design for what the buyer needs and try to put it out there to allow them to kind of self-serve, then there's less burden on your sales team to actually give the pitch and, sort of get it right and ask the right questions and all those other things. You just better support them because they can point at things, if they are engaged, and if they're not, yeah, the buyer can kind of self-serve. All right, we're kind of down to the final minute or so here. Any quick final thoughts I'll throw to each of you for just any one practical piece of advice for people that you want to either remind them of what you said earlier or something new. But let's run through them quickly here. So Natalia.
I think the themes are simplification, great data, frameworks, best practices, community, and knowing your buyers in an obsessive way.
Very good. Matt?
I would say just start somewhere, whether it's with AI or anything else. And, the more narrow, specific starting point that you pick, the better.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, I think building out an AI strategy on what problems or outcomes you're looking to achieve, and then building out the governance and the architecture to solve that, I think is going to get people to the direction of getting use cases out the door.
Great. Thank you all so much for this. A bunch of great information, and I thought some really good focus areas for people. People, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn about the things that I talked about or any of this team. We're here to help and help everybody be successful. So have a wonderful holidays and a great 2026. Thank you.